Welcome to the Every Night is Game Night preview series, the show where designers and publishers share their passion and answer critical questions about their Kickstarter projects. If you're on the fence about a pledge, this is the show for you.
Every Night is Game Night preview series, episode 20, Palm Island, with the designer, John Mietling. Yo, my peoples, what's up? Welcome back to Every Night is Game Night. I am your host, Jason. Thank you so much for joining us. We are back with another preview series. We have not done one of these in a little while. But if you haven't checked out Kickstarter recently, wow, there are so many projects on there that are popping up for solo gamers, cooperative gamers, strategy gamers, all the people who listen to our show, and just so much stuff out there. What we're going to do today is preview one of the smaller projects, but one of those big game and little packages type things. So we'll get into that in just a second. But first, I want to introduce you to the designer of the new Kickstarter that is live right now, Palm Island. His name is John Mietling. He is the CEO of Portal Dragon Games and the designer of Palm Island. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. This is looking forward to this. Portal Dragon seems you definitely have some titles that I'm interested in. Palm Island is definitely one of them. But first, I want to we were talking before the show. You were hitting me with a whole bunch of knowledge about who you are as a gamer. And how you squeeze in being a founder and CEO, along with being a gamer and all the other things that you do. So let's run through it, man. Let's get to know John Mietling, the gamer, and also John Mietling, the founder and CEO of your company.
All right, so I started playing games quite a while ago. I started with Magic the Gathering, as many people do. I took that I don't know, I guess you could say too far, to the point where I was spending much more money than I should. I got to the point where I was hiding my purchases from my wife, and I was like, this is very unhealthy, and that's how it kind of went with me. So I backed off from that, but I ended up getting much more interested in games for our family. And so my family has always played games. I mean, of course, we've played Monopoly, and it's ruined relationships in our family, just like the rest of that sort of epidemic has swept across our nation and the rest of the world. Not many games actually can do something like that, But
and you have a big old family over there, don't you? Right?
I do. So we're a foster family. My wife and I, we have been doing this for a year and a half now, actually. And we have two of our own children that were born to us, and then we have a guardianship of our daughter now, who was our first foster child. We had her for a year, but since then we got her sister, we got another young boy and his brother, and then we have another one as well. And so we have now 7 children. So we're a family of 9, and that makes our house very hectic, which is why it's excellent to do this when all of the children are sleeping, because we would not be able to record something like this during the day. It's pretty chaotic around here. But yeah, that's kind of, so through our family and through my family growing up too, playing games and stuff, I mean, it's just always been a part of our life. And as our family has grown, I've noticed that it's even more so. Games have been a part of it, to the point where I feel like games should be a necessary part of everybody's family, especially foster families. It was an excellent a tool that we used, having a third-party medium or to kind of gather around and say, you're new to our home, and I know it's kind of awkward to get to know each other and stuff, but let's play a game. Let's do this activity together. And that kind of, like, in a way, dilutes the whole awkwardness and helps us to focus on this third element that adds some level of camaraderie and social activity as well as education. And so games for me have become so much a part of my life that it's like I use them. We have 2 of our kids are homeschooled, and we use games through education with them and trying to teach them both problem solving and math, and all the different skills that you can learn through games is just an amazing tool. And I love board games, if that's not obvious.
I know, right? But I mean, I know a lot of folks are kind of in that realm with their dads, and they're trying to communicate their games, and yet you've taken a couple of extra steps over there. You've did become a designer, and you become a founder of your own LLC over there. How did that all happen?
So I have a bit of a disease, or some sort of a condition that I can't really stop. I have always been kind of a creative person where I feel the need to create, and so I dream about the days that I can sit around and do nothing. But then when that day comes, I always make something to do. I always find some sort of activity to do something, to make something, to create. If the kids aren't leading me, then I'm leading them in building a fort in the basement, So it's just always been a part of my personality. So along, what was it, about 4 years ago now, I was just coming off of actually being part of a video game startup company. I worked with them for years, and we really weren't going anywhere, and there was a lot of blockages that kind of stopped the project from moving forward. I was doing 3D design and artwork, graphic designs, as well as the game design for that company, along with a few other individuals. But it really was, I was hitched to somebody else's wagon, and so I was really stuck going at their pace, which was frustrating for me. So I started working on another project with kind of, while that project was kind of like on a downturn, and I had some free hours. I was free hours, I say, even though they weren't very free. But I started working on another project, which was actually based on a video game idea that I had. We had a lot of ideas in our wiki that were different ideas we had for the very future, and one of those was a game called Zephyr Winds of Change, which then later became a board game. It was the second board game that I actually produced. And so I worked on that design with Aaron Cook, and that was a co-design. So both of us kind of had similar, that we worked with people before in creative projects and had blockages that we had to deal with. And so we both were like, let's work on a project. So we started just plug away on some ideas on different types of games, and we actually really liked a video game called Faster Than Light, and we were like, this is such awesome, I love the experience of this video game. I really wish I could have that same experience in a board game, that a game can punish me and I can lose it but enjoy it. Not that it would be that you always lose, but that when I lose, I still enjoy the experience. And that, to me, that's something that's kind of gotten lost in a lot of video games for me recently. Normally that's why I play multiplayer games mostly, as opposed to like most story-based games. They just kind of it feels like most of them, with some excluded, of course. I know there's plenty of titles that can be cited, but a lot of them just hold your hand through the story, and you just kind of, don't get penalized very much. Where I come from, Super Mario Brothers and games that were like, you got to beat it in one sitting, and then you'd like pause your NES and go to dinner because mom called you, and you really hope the game doesn't crash before you get there again to pick up where you left off, or leave it on overnight and hope that the game didn't crash or mom didn't shut it off or something like that. And that's kind of where I come from with that. So that's where that game kind of came from. So with that, we were I don't know where we were planning on taking that game, whether we were going to be self-publishing or looking for a publisher. We just wanted to design something fun, but it ended up being like a lot of fun, and so we really, really liked the game. And I don't know, I've always been kind of had an entrepreneur sort of spirit. My mom has started tons of businesses over the years. Now we have a family cacao business making raw organic cacao, which I work part-time for them as well. And so it's always just been part of my family to just do it, get it done. Don't wait for someone, just make it happen. That I could sit and dream, or I could actually work and make it happen. And so that's just been always part of my spirit, I guess. And so I decided to go ahead and start to pursue some publishing routes with saying that I can do the artwork for this game. I've always been a designer, artist. And so if I can do the artwork and that, what would it take to actually publish this, to figure out manufacturing and distribution and everything that would be required in order to publish a game. So that became very interesting to me, both to experience, but to almost to prove to myself that it's something I could do, or really, I guess, maybe explore if it was something that I could do. And I've really enjoyed the whole process. Like there's been a lot of people with horror stories that they've were warning me along the way to, be careful, and I know that there's lots of arguments on both sides and tons of discussion about where the industry is heading and what's happening with all these small companies picking up and stuff. But for me, it really came down to I want to create something that I have complete control over. And that probably comes from being part of so many projects that I didn't have control and I was stuck going at other people's pace. So that may be why I decided to mainly do it more on my own. But that's kind of where I'm at. And so now I've got lots of titles going. I have a few years kind of planned ahead of a few titles that could be coming out. But pretty much how I work with games is I kind of let the cream rise to the top. So I work on the designs, work on developing the games through the different playtester groups that I'm part of, and kind of let the best games show themselves. So if people keep asking about the games or excited about the games, those are the ones that I pour more energy into. And so that's kind of where we're at, and what's brought us to our third title here coming to Kickstarter in just a couple days.
We were talking about that before the call as well. Palm Island was one of those things where you said you were designing in the middle of designing 7 games in a row, but this was one that just kind of came up for you. Oh man, this is awesome, or all that kind of stuff. So so let's talk about Palm Island. Pretty unique game. The thing that got me about Palm Island was that this is a game that you could play with your hands, and you don't need a table. And you don't need, we'll get into it in a second, but I kind of imagine a scenario where you're waiting in an airport or you're on an international flight or something, and you just want to play a game, but your phone died or whatever it is, and you want to play something. Is this the kind of game that someone would whip out and start to play?
This is perfect for that. That's exactly what it was designed for. So I actually started with this game. I have kind of with my designs, I have a list of things that I like, kind of my dream list, saying I'd like to make games that do X, Y, or Z. So that was one of the things that I had on there for quite a while, that I was like, I really wish I had a tableless game, a game that didn't require a table. We could sit around, or we could do it on a road trip, and I mean, we have a bunch of gamers sitting in the car. We normally carpool together going to Gen Con or these other cons, and we don't have many choices. I know there are other games out there that have done it, but I really haven't found ones that really click for me.
Not a lot of good ones. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, so you had mentioned how you spent some time on airplanes and things like that, and this was something I didn't really consider quite as much as I should have, possibly, but it ended up being definitely an interesting thing that opened my eyes to a different type of gamer that is out there. I have a number of playtesters who have different lives than myself. I mean, that I don't really travel a lot. I don't find myself away from home all that much, but I've found that there are a lot of people out there that their lives just end up being different than the typical gamer, that they can't get themselves to a table. They may not even have a playable table space in their home. There's other people I also had that contacted me and that were so excited for this game because of the amount of time they spend in the hospital with their son. And it was like, that really kind of hit me hard, that it was like, I didn't really think about these types of gamers that are out there. And there's tons of people who are either on the road or find themselves in a lot of waiting rooms and stuff. And they still love games just like the rest of us, but they don't have as much opportunity. And so it really was cool that Palm Island was able to fulfill that. And I didn't really plan for that necessarily. I wanted something that I could, sit on the couch and play, or play, when I'm riding in the car or something. But this actually is kind of fulfilling a need for their lives. And I was really humbled, I guess, by that it was like, wow, this is a big deal. And I'm really excited to explore more in the whole table list. I mean, I've got a lot of ideas for expansions and sister games for games that will not require a table, because that is a big thing. And I've seen now more and more posts on Facebook, and it might be like the whole thing of once you own a car, you see that car everywhere, that you just open your eyes to that side of things. But there's a ton of people that are asking, what's a good game to play on a small table? What's a good game to play on a plane or on a hospital tray table, things like that. And there's a lot of people out there who are looking for games like that. And so that really opened my eyes and made me excited that something I'm working on could provide that for somebody.
Yeah, there are so many posts. Like, give me your top 5 camping games, or give me, I need something to, like we were saying before, like be in a hospital or something like that. So yeah, it sounds like this is going to fit the bill.
Speaking of camping, actually, we also have offering a all-weather version that's all plastic cards, so that it's waterproof as well, and so that one you can throw into your in with your tent or your camping gear and not have to worry too much about that. I'm not sure how many people want to sit out in the rain and play it, but that is possible that you don't have to worry about that so much.
If you go down like a rafting trip and you can just pack that in your barrel and not have to worry about it and whip it back out at night, then or if you have small kids and you're just playing in your little office and the kids are running rampant, people are going to really want that.
Yeah, it was actually one of our early play tests was we were at a kind of a retreat with a bunch of friends of ours out at a campground, and there was a woman there who she loves games, and she would always play, like, she had these really skinny solitaire cards that she could play solitaire just in her hand. And so I was like, oh, you're like the perfect candidate for this game I'm working on. And so I had her try it. And so it was really cool to just sit around the campfire. I mean, it was more during the day or whatever, because it is like, if you don't have light, you can't really see, which is really the only downside. I was almost like, can we make glow in the dark cards or something like that? Because it really does fulfill that need, like to wherever you would pull out your phone, that's what Palm Island can be. And so that's really what I love about the game.
So what do you do in Palm Island?
So Palm Island, you are kind of the leader of a village, and so what you're doing is creating your village from the ground up. In a way, you start off with some very basic buildings, and as you move your way through the deck, you upgrade those buildings, and that's so they can produce more resources, or they can produce victory points, or there's some market cards that allow you to trade resources for other resources. The crux of this ends up being around the physical mechanism that you hold the cards in your hand, and when you store a resource, you tap it sideways and put it behind the deck, and it sticks out of the side, which you can see in any of the images on the Kickstarter page or anything, that it sticks out of the side of the deck. So then that's really the whole game there. It's just 17 cards. It uses a round tracker that flips, rotates 90 degrees, and then you on the x-axis, or wait, that would be the Z. But
I got that messed up all the time
with 3D manipulation through audio only here. So you rotate it 90 degrees, and then you would flip it over. So that's round one is on the top. I guess I should explain how the cards kind of look or work. So the cards each have 4 different sections to them. They have a top, a bottom, and on the back they have a top and bottom as well. And each of these sections is oriented so that when the card rotates, this whole section is now also, the bottom section would be face up when you rotate it 90 degrees. Then if I flip the card over, then that section's also on top. And if I rotate not 90 degrees, 180 degrees. If I rotate it 180 degrees, then that side is right side up as well. So it has these 4 different states, and whichever state is on the top front side of the card, that is the one that's active. So it uses 17 cards, but it feels like a lot more than just 17 cards. So, and that's been one of the main comments we've got on the game through playtesters and reviewers, is that they're like, this feels like a whole like engine building resource engine just in 17 cards, and that's is crazy. And it's funny how it just kind of all clicked together really quick. And actually, the core game itself has not actually seen many revisions from spreadsheet to actually use. So with this one, I went from brain to paper to prove that you could hold cards and move them. I didn't actually lay out what each card should be, and then I took it to a spreadsheet and kind of mathed out my what I thought the values all should be. And since then, there's actually only been 2 cards that have seen any changes, which has been an incredible thing to me. And we've had now thousands of play tests of the game, and everyone remarks on the balance is really good. So that's been very surprising to me, because most of my games end up seeing a lot of iterations. And this one has not seen quite as many, just because it ends up being a very simple mechanism that it has.
What's the player count?
So it is 1 to 2 is what the player count for the game that you buy is, but you can combine multiple games and you can play with more players, and it does scale to as many games as you want to put together, although I wouldn't really suggest playing with 20 people, because it definitely ends up feeling more like a solo together type of experience. But really I would say, you playing it with 4 would be good. But you could do more if you really wanted to. But
so what is it? Everybody gets 17 cards, and
yep.
Like I would get 17, you get 17, and then you're kind of racing each other. Is that
so?
How
There's
it
a
works?
few different ways. So this game very much is a solo game that has multiplayer variants, and I feel that's important to state it that way, because that is what it was designed to be, was a solo game. But when you play the variants, there are 2 different ones. There is a competitive variant and a cooperative variant. The cooperative variant, what you do is you work together. So you'd have your deck of cards, I'd have my deck of cards, and we have these disasters that are lurking on the horizon we have to prepare our village for. And so what we would normally do in a game that we play by ourselves, we'd go through the deck, upgrade our resources, upgrade our victory points, and get to a certain point that we would try to hit certain thresholds to work our way through the game. Now, there are some other solo features, which I'll get to in a second. But for the cooperative, how it would work is we're both working to get our villages upgraded, but we also have these lurking disasters that require a certain number of resources to satisfy, I guess. And we have to upgrade those cards 3 times. They start with their top front state, and then it rotates, and then it flips, and then once we pay that 3rd cost, it then has the green check mark saying we successfully prepared our village and will now avoid this disaster that's coming. So this ends up costing us extra resource that we have to feed into as players that will take away from our normal scores that we would get. So as if we were to play together, I would probably, being more experienced, would probably devote a little bit more of my resource to the disasters, so that you could focus a little bit more on points, because the point system works that whoever we take the lowest score, and that's our group score. So that way it leaves nobody kind of behind. Instead, it ends up making sure that everybody is doing well, because otherwise we could have one person champion the disaster and the rest of us just go get points. But that means that none of us participated. And that's really what I wanted the game to end up being, is that all of us should be participating. So we should even it out, and that we all should be contributing, so that we all have higher scores across the board. And that way we would have the highest, a higher lowest score.
So can you lose this game, or is it a high score kind of thing?
So in cooperative, yes, you can lose. You have 8 rounds, and if you do not complete the disaster in the 8 rounds, so at the end of each round, you have a chance to pay into the disaster, and it has, as I said, 3 different times you have to pay it. So if you do not complete that by the end of round 8, then you lose. So yes, that does have the lose condition to the game.
Okay, and the solo as well, or?
Solo does not have a lose condition. It just has that you scored poorly. If you play that. Now, the co-op cards do scale to solo play as well. So you could play a disaster by yourself. So those scale to any number of player count. They all of the costs are based on player count. So if you play with 4 people, it's going to cost you a certain amount of resources per player. So it might cost us 4 stone per player. Well, that would mean I could pay all 4 of those stone. I'm sorry. If it was 4 per player, it would be 8 stone, and I could play all 8 if I happen to have it. And you wouldn't have to pay any of it, but we have to end up making sure we're balancing that right and working together to make sure our decks are being used to their maximum capacity. Mm-hmm. So I think you asked also about the other multiplayer, which was cooperative, or we talked about cooperative. Competitive is the other mode. So competitive, you're actually racing. So you do need to have a little bit more experience with the game in order to play the competitive, and it'd be fun. So your first time, I would definitely not suggest you play competitive. Now, we've had some suggestions, and I'm going to be adding a feature to the game that allows you to play a symmetrical competitive, so that way everybody organizes their decks exactly the same. And this was so then that will allow you to play without having to race and stuff. But we're working on that to have that as an option in there as well. But right now it ends up being for the people who are experienced. The race is actually quite fun because you might make poor decisions racing through your deck in order to get the first right to buy the special bonus points, or if you're playing with the villagers. So what there's two different things you could choose to play. You basically have the basic mode and the advanced mode. The basic mode is just points, and they have diminishing values as you go through. So if I buy one first, the next one that you could buy is worth less points. So you want to get there first, right? The villagers all have unique abilities, and so if I go and buy one, then I'm taking one that you can't then use, and every round I'm going to get to use that guy. Or it might be one that scales based on points, so if I upgrade these certain buildings, each of those buildings are worth extra points. So you have to weigh how you're building your deck and what is the most important to buy. And of course, if you get there first, you get the first right to make that purchase. And so the speed element is designed to make people make mistakes. So then that way they're racing to get there and they're making more mistakes. But that does also cause you to need a little bit more experience with the game. And it being mainly a solo game, that's kind of was the thought behind it, that most people are going to play it a lot.
It sounds really like it. I cannot believe that you can fit this game in the palm of your hand the way you're talking about it. It just seems like there's so much going on.
So yeah, there's 45 cards, and it does have 17 cards for each player. There's 2-player decks. It comes with the three disasters to start and 5 villagers, and on the reverse side of the villagers are the bonus points. So that's where all those kind of fit. And then there's one more thing that we haven't talked about yet for solo play, because again, this is a solo game, and it's really meant to be something that you can play quite a bit. I mean, I've played probably thousands of times now, maybe close if not. And there's another feature in there that's actually called feats, and these are feats that you accomplish. They're basically achievements that you gather throughout the game. So if you end the game with meeting a certain criteria, for instance, there's one that's called Tooth of the Beast, and if you have all of your canoe houses upgraded to tier 2, if you have them all upgraded to tier 2, then you also get over 32 points, I believe it is, then you earn this feat, and now this gives you an ability you can use in future games. You add this Tooth of the Beast to your deck, and now this card will say you get to start off with extra canoe house upgrades to start the game. So your deck ends up becoming better because you accomplished that task. Mm-hmm. So there's a few different difficulties you can play. If you're going to play easy mode, you can end up playing as many feats as you want in a deck. So when you play the game, you can use all 6 feats if you've earned them. If you play medium, you can only use 1 feat per game that you're using. So, of course, the more feats you have, the better you're going to be doing, because each one gives you cool special abilities or bonus points to start. But the hard mode doesn't let you use any feats. And this is really seeing how high of a score you can get with just the core deck.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
But it kind of has a little bit of a, I don't know if you, I hate the terms like thrown around almost too much. Or I guess I'm saying I hate to apply the term because it doesn't quite fit it, but it does have a legacy-ish type thing to use that term, even though it is more of just, it does have more of a campaign to it, I guess I would say.
Campaign mode.
Because you're not tearing up any cards or destroying or permanently changing anything. But once you've achieved that, you have that ability that you can use in future games if you wish.
Cool. So I used to travel a lot, and that's kind of how I got the association of like being on an international flight. And, like in college, I was able to go all over the place. And I had I would have like a playing cards or another deck of cards where it would be those kind of games that are in your hand. The main flaw of those was that the choices were pretty limited and obvious, right? So, you like in your game, you're basically on every round, you're choosing between one or another card, and then either you're tucking it in or doing whatever, but it's basically 2 choices in front of you. In those other games, the choices are pretty obvious. What did you bake into your game so that the choices can kind of like, the choices actually have meaning and like, different victory conditions and all that kind of stuff?
So the first time you play Palm Island, you might feel like the choices are pretty obvious. but you're probably going to score also pretty low. The choices seem like, oh, well, yes, I should do this. This is the obvious thing. I have that resource. I should spend that resource.
Right.
But really the trick to the game ends up coming in when to not spend resource. So there is a little bit of nuance to both when you're spending your resources and then when also you're activating and moving resources. Because sometimes so what you do to start the game, you shuffle the whole deck. So you have 17 cards that are in a completely different order every time you play the game, which makes a humongous difference. Because if you have both of your temples at the back or the front of your deck, you're going to have a lot harder time getting them upgraded. And we actually had this with some of the reviewers. They shuffled up and just played through, and they got some of those blockages and didn't do so well because of it. However, in knowing the game, the better you get at the game, you can get more consistent scores. You do get higher scores, but I found that really with me, it's about getting a consistent score regardless of the shuffle. So when you have those sorts of blockages of saying these types of things are there, it's not a problem so much as it is that you need to find a different way to approach that. So I guess it is a problem, but you need to find a different way to solve that problem than the obvious. So there's lots of different ways you can end up making upgrades. So you can, if there's sometimes I never upgrade my loggers because they produce pretty good resource to start, and they're a long path to get them to good points. And you also, when you convert them over into final points, they give you a good point bonus, but then they stop producing. So you got to be careful on when to make that sort of commitment of, am I going to go ahead and lose these resources? Normally you want that to roll over pretty late in the game, but in some builds you might want that to happen earlier because it's an opportunity to get points that you can't get elsewhere because there's other sorts of blockages. So many of the cards have points, some of the cards don't have points, and so you have to debate which way should I take these. Some cards have it that you upgrade it. If you pay a certain type of resource, you'll be able to flip it. If you pay to different types of resources, you then rotate it. So you're picking two different paths. So you have a lot of choices that you have to make, and you have to make the right ones fairly early, depending on your shuffle. And well, in order to get your highest score. So this is at least what I've found in playing the game as much as I have. Now there is some level of forgiveness, in the mid ranges, but you're not going to get high score, if you don't have like a clear defined plan based on your shuffle early on. And that's something you kind of just learn as you play the game more.
Awesome. So that is Palm Island. Like I said, the Kickstarter is live now. Thank you, John, for giving us the time and sharing about the project. Good luck with the rest of it.
Oh, thank you so much.
And that's going to go ahead and do it for another episode of the Every Night is Game Night preview series. Once again, thank you so much for joining us. And thanks to John for taking some time away from his children, so many children, and also his company to give us a little bit of time. The Kickstarter is now live, and we do have a written preview over at BoardGamersAnonymous.com to go along with this preview series episode. So if you want to head over to BoardGamersAnonymous.com, you'll be able to read a little bit about what Anthony thinks of Palm Island. If you want to get in touch with the show in other ways, we are available at ENGN_podcast. You can find us at the website, BGG, Facebook. The Board Gamers Anonymous has a guild that you can just hit us up there. We are so available and always willing to hear your feedback. And yes, I'm going to ask for this every single time. Please go over to iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, wherever you can give us a rating. Give us 5 stars or however many stars you think we deserve. So that helps us get to the top of the algorithms, or as high as we can possibly get, so that we can get more exposure, and the more people that we can share what we're doing with, the better. All right, that's it. Later, everybody.